So some years ago, I was in a large room about this size, full of other church leaders, and I noticed that on the side of the room was a gentleman all by himself, and no one was talking to him. So there was this huge buzz of conversation happening into the room. He was the only one left out, and we all know what that feels like, don't we? It absolutely sucks to be in a room full of people, and you're the one who isn't part of a conversation. And so I left the conversation that I was a part of, and I walked across to the other side of the room, and I started to engage him in conversation. And the narrative that was running through my head was, he's probably shy, he's probably like a rookie, he's probably feeling a little bit out of his depth, and so he just needs someone to be friendly and come alongside him, and he'll start to relax a bit and enjoy what's going on. And to be really honest with you, he was really hard work. I'd ask a question and he'd answer it with as few words as possible, and then there'd be silence. So it's like, okay. So then I'd ask another question, and again he would answer in a very short sentence, and there would be silence. And so it was like this one after another, and we weren't really getting very far. But I said to him, hey, well, would you like to sit with me at lunch? And he said yes. And so the conversation continued, and over the course of the lunch that we had together, the narrative that I had in my head started to unravel. And he went from somebody that I saw as probably a rookie who was out of his depth, to me realizing that actually I was out of my depth, and that he was somebody I needed to look up to, because I found out that he worked in the Middle East. And I asked another question. And I found out that he led a church in the Middle East. I asked another question. And he told me that his church was a secret church, that actually they couldn't meet publicly because if they were caught, they would all go to prison. I was like, wow, respect. And then he told me that he actually oversaw some other churches. I asked another question. And he told me he oversaw 400 other churches, all in this country. And I'm thinking, my goodness, this guy's an archbishop like twice over. And then he told me that he wasn't actually allowed to be in the country where he led a church. If he was caught in the country, he would definitely be arrested and he'd probably be executed. And so he was part of this gathering of church leaders to get some refreshment. He had some important meetings that he was going to be a part of, and then he was going back to his church. And so my thinking about him changed over the course of that kind of hour and a half lunch that I had with him. I went from sort of thinking not very highly of him to being in awe of him. And as he talked more, being really humbled. And then at the end, looking up to him and thinking, wow, this man is spending his life for Jesus in a way that is just in a different league from anybody else I know. Now, I tell you that story of how my thinking about somebody kind of went up step by step by step. Because as a church, we are talking about worship. And worship is about how we behave towards what we think highly of. And so, if we want to grow in worship, it's not about learning to sing the right words to the songs, and it's not about singing louder, and it's not about learning some technique, but it's all about where Jesus is in our thinking. It's about whether or not we rate him. It's about whether or not we think highly of him. Now the question is, do we think more of Jesus than we do about what other people think of us? Do we think highly of him to the point that actually it affects our commitments? Is he highest in our regard to the point that it doesn't matter how we're feeling, and it doesn't matter what our circumstances are, we will choose to honor and glorify him? Is he worth turning up early for? Is he important enough for us to arrange our lives and rearrange our lives so that they are completely focused on him? Now, the first Christians answered a huge yes to every single one of those questions. So much so that they had to invent a new word to describe these people. And that's how we have the word enthusiastic. It refers to people who are so God-focused that it affected everything that they did. It affected their mood, it affected their commitments, it affected their relationships. They were enthused with God. and they were enthusiastic in the way that they spoke about him. So for us here at Salisbury Vineyard, as we talk about worship, it's about how highly we think of Jesus, but it's more than that. Because Jesus calls us to be his disciples, but you're not going to want to follow or emulate somebody that you're not impressed by. You're not going to extend yourself or sacrifice your life for somebody that you don't hold in very high esteem, for somebody that you could take or leave, for somebody that you don't really think is worth very much. You're not going to rearrange your life and change your commitments for somebody that you don't rate. And so the question for all of us is, how much do we rate Jesus? Because the truth is that being a disciple of Jesus begins with worship. It's as he goes up in our estimation, as we begin to treat him differently because of who he is, which is called worship. Actually, we grow as disciples of Jesus. So today, we're going to talk about Jesus, and I want what he does and says to speak for itself. So we're going to be looking at Mark chapter 1, and just to give you a little bit of context, Jesus is in the town of Capernaum, and he was one of the builders in the town, so some people would have recognized him. Maybe he'd done some work in their house or, on a property that they owned. So he's one of the builders in the city, and on the Sabbath day, Mark tells us that Jesus was in the synagogue. In one of the other Gospels, we're told that it was Jesus' custom to be in the synagogue on the Sabbath day. It was one of his commitments to demonstrate that God was highest in his thinking. It was part of his worship, that every Sabbath day he would be in the synagogue. He was devoted to fellowship with other people who were also followers of God, and he would gather with them to worship. And so we're going to pick up the story on the Sabbath day in Capernaum, and this is Mark chapter 1. We're going to start reading from verse 21. It says this. It says, "Then they went into Capernaum, and immediately on the Sabbath he entered the synagogue and taught. And they were astonished at his teaching, for he taught them as one having authority and not as one of the scribes." So on this particular Sabbath day, this particular worship day, the town builder was either given the microphone or he got hold of the microphone and ended up being the speaker at the front. Now maybe someone was sick, maybe someone cancelled at the last minute, or maybe they were taking turns, but somehow the builder ended up at the front of the meeting teaching the scriptures. And what impressed people the most wasn't the fact that he was a surprisingly good speaker. It's like, wow, this guy's good. It wasn't the fact that when he spoke, he came across as being really knowledgeable and intelligent. They're like, wow, which university did he go to? And it wasn't the fact that he was a really entertaining speaker, although he was probably all three of those things. What struck people most of all was that there was an authority to what he said. There was a weight behind what he was saying. There was an impact to the words that he was using. There was something about the way that he spoke that was powerful. And Mark tells us here that people were astonished. The literal translation of that word means that they were struck with shock. They were gobsmacked. They were lost for words. They were deeply impacted by this man who was teaching at the front. They didn't know how to respond. Now, there was a man in their synagogue with an unclean spirit, and he cried out, saying, "Let us alone. What have we to do with you, Jesus of Nazareth? Did you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God." So, we're in this kind of moment, this dramatic moment where the builder is leading the teaching in the service, and he's really, really good. And everybody's absolutely gobsmacked by what's happened. And suddenly this dramatic moment is injected with a whole load of drama. Like, completely out of the blue. And this isn't like the town drunk, and it's not the town weirdo. This is an upstanding member of this worshipping community who gets up in the middle of Jesus' sermon, and in another gospel it says start shouting. So this is one of those really awkward moments if you're a speaker where somebody starts to cause a problem and you're like, what's going to happen? So suddenly, someone has kind of risen up and they are interrupting the talk. Something that Jesus had said made them feel deeply uncomfortable. So uncomfortable they couldn't stay sat down. So uncomfortable they had to speak out. There was something about what he was inviting people to which made them say, we want nothing to do with you. We don't want what you're talking about. We don't want you here. And as this person is shouting out and causing a disturbance, suddenly the things that are being said take a slightly different turn, and it becomes clear that it isn't just an ordinary member of the conversation of the congregation who's upset, but that this is a spiritual power play. Mark tells us that there was an unclean spirit that had some kind of leverage in this man's life and was using this moment and this man's emotional turmoil to interrupt what Jesus was doing. To basically say, I know who you are, I know where you come from, I know what your agenda is, and it has a dark side. So, the Bible teaches us that we don't live in a neutral environment. That God is sovereign, he has absolute control, he owns everything, but there is a devil. And the devil is an unemployed cherub, he's a disgraced angel. And there are others like him who have also been disgraced. And they have set their hearts on standing against everything that God is for. They have decided that they will resist everything that God wants to do, and they will encourage everything that will cause pain and damage in people's lives. They have decided that they will be anti-Christ in everything that they do, and they will be anti-Christ in everything that they try and stir up and encourage. And so this is what's going on. Jesus says that the devil comes to steal, kill, and destroy. He comes to twist and to taint and to corrupt everything that's good. And that's what is happening in this moment. It's like first impressions matter. And this first impression for the builder was going too well. Like everyone is gobsmacked, like, wow! And so this unclean spirit interrupts and tries to derail what is happening. Verse 25. But Jesus rebuked him, saying, be quiet and come out of him. So, we've got the drama of the builder who's the preacher. And then it gets more dramatic with this interruption to the sermon. And now it gets even more dramatic because Jesus responds. Jesus reacts. It's like, you don't get to talk to me like that. You have just crossed a boundary big time. Shut up, get out. In the Greek, it's just 4 words. And there's no discussion, there's no hesitation, there's no argument, it's just a command. And when the unclean spirit had convulsed him and cried out with a loud voice, he came out of him. Then they were all amazed, so that they questioned among themselves, saying, what is this? What new doctrine is this? For with authority he commands even the unclean spirits, and they obey him. So it's probably at this moment that the congregation realizes what's going on. To start off with, they probably just think that it's someone that they know who's part of their congregation who's upset with Jesus. And probably quite a number of people agreed with what they were saying. We don't like what you're saying. It's too hard, it's too challenging. We don't want to be a part of what you're inviting people to. Go and preach in a different synagogue. Don't come back here. And suddenly, with Jesus' 4 words, there's like, oh, this is a spiritual thing going on here. Everybody's eyes are now open to what's been going on. And Mark says to us, he says that they were amazed. Actually, the word that he uses says, it literally means they were almost terrified. It's like that moment where you're not sure whether to cheer or whether actually you're really afraid. It's like the level of authority that Jesus revealed in that moment was scary. The instant response of that unclean demon to Jesus' words, the way that it shifted the situation. I mean, they were already impressed with his authority, but now he'd just shown it to them in action. And they suddenly realized, oh, we're in the presence of more than a builder. And that was a bit scary for some of them. and immediately his fame spread throughout all the region of Galilee. So, step by step, Jesus went up in people's estimation. To start off with, they were gobsmacked at the power of his words. And then they were dumbfounded by the way that he dispatched that demonic power. And so Jesus went from being a builder in the town to being someone that people was impressed by, to being the person that was in the forefront of everybody's mind. He was the person that everybody was talking about over Sunday lunch. And he was the person that everybody was still talking about on Monday, to the point that the whole region, not just the town of Capernaum, but the whole region of Galilee, heard about Jesus and was talking about this man who dispatched a demon with a word. So, when you have an order of things in the Bible, the order is always significant. This is the very first miracle that Mark records Jesus doing, and it's the same in Luke's gospel as well. They both, Mark and Luke, the first amazing thing that they record Jesus doing is casting a demon out of somebody. And the reason that they put that first is because they want to get across the message to us that top of Jesus' agenda is to set people free from the oppression of the devil. It's like if you're going to start, you start with what's most important, and that's where Jesus started. And the truth is that for us, we are often oblivious to what the devil is doing in our own lives and around us, because he works subtly, but also because it's actually quite an uncomfortable thing to think about. We would rather not try to wrestle with the idea that perhaps some of what we wrestle with is a spiritual battle. It's a bit concerning. What will other people think of us? What does that mean? And so we prefer not to think about it, which the devil is very happy with. But also he's really subtle in what he does. The truth is that we are in a battleground spiritually. And the truth is that the devil seeks to oppress people. He seeks to find ways to subtract from our lives and to limit us and to make us resistant to the teaching and the words of Jesus. Now, what I love about Mark in this account here is that he says that it was an unclean spirit. He doesn't say the man was unclean. He says the spirit was unclean. The man is a victim in this. There's something going on in his life that has given this demonic power some leverage, and it is using him for its own purpose. And that's what happens to us. We get used. We get used by a being that is kind of steps ahead of us. And we're the victims. But the good news is that Jesus has come to set the captives free. And the good news is that he has come to break open the prison for those who are in prison. And the good news is that he has the power to do that. The good news is that his name is the highest name in heaven, on earth, and under the earth. And when Jesus died on the cross, he took on all of the power of sin and death and hell. He took on all of those disgraced angels single-handedly. He went to hell by himself and took on everything that hell had. The fact that he rose from the dead is proof that he won single-handedly. Nobody had to go with him to help him. He came out full of life. He defeated sin, death, and hell once and for all. And so he has all the authority, he has all the power. And he's a good king, and he wants us as his children to be free. And so if you are willing to open your heart to Jesus' words, and you're willing to allow his words to impact your heart, you're willing to receive his message, he will set you free. He'll set you free from those things that the devil is oppressing you. And so what does that look like? Well, it looks like being devoted to the scriptures. It looks like allowing those scriptures to shape the choices that you make. It's like Jesus' words, allowing the power of his words into your life. It looks like being part of a community and allowing people in the community to pray for you and to speak Jesus' words into your life. It looks like taking communion. Some of you know what I've just done. But see, the thing is that Mark has put this story here because he wants us to know that our King has come to set us free. And he has the power and the authority to do so. And it's top of his list. And so if you need to be set free, he wants to help you. So, the question at the end of this is, does this change the way that you think about Jesus? It certainly did for the people who were there and for the people who heard that story. Remember, the whole region ended up thinking highly of Jesus. So you might be sat there thinking, well, I wasn't there. Well, lots of people in that region weren't there. They just heard the story, just like I told you. And because of what they heard, Jesus went up in their estimation. Will this change the way that you see him? Will it change the way that you think about him? Because if it does, you will grow as a worshipper. So, as part of this series that we're doing, I am inviting a couple people each time that we talk about worship to come up and to share with you one tip that they have learned in their journey with Jesus in terms of what it means to worship and what it means to grow in worship. And so I'm really excited. We've got two people lined up today who are prepared to share something with you that they've learned. And if you would be open and willing, you'll learn from what they've learned. So this is them passing on to you their best tip. So as I've said before, please, those who've come up have spent time thinking about what they're going to say, praying about what they're going to say, and because they don't do this every week, this is a bit nervous. It's a bit nerve-wracking to stand in front of a lot of people and kind of share from their heart. So please, thank those who come up afterwards. Tell them what you appreciated about what they say, and that you're proud to be in the same church as them. So, Fiona, would you like to come up and share first?
Worship. So I worship, we all worship because God is the best and he's better than all the rest. And for me, worship is how I live my life. I don't quite know why we mix up worship so much with what we sing. Why don't we have this phrase, worship life? And I want how I sing, I call Jesus my Lord to be reflected in my life. And so, I've already forgotten what I'm saying. So I've been learning something about worship from Tigger, my dog. Tigger teaches me a lot, and this is the latest thing I've learned from Tigger. I'm going to try and do this with the microphone, but I need a volunteer, so just your closest you'll do. So you need to stand there and walk that way and then that way without bashing any weights.
Sit.
I'm Tigger. I was getting that. I don't know. So I'm Tigger, just as me. Okay, so here am I. This is Tigger's preferred position. In case you can't see me, I'm lying on the floor on my dog blanket. Off you go, Jess. So here she goes. And then you have to come back again. Oh, yes. And this is Tigger's preferred position when I walk past her. So can you see that? I've got my legs and all my legs. I've got all my legs in the air. So what is Tigger doing? I don't even know. What on earth has that got to do with worship? Well, so I think Tigger is trying to communicate two things, and the first of that is, I'm yours. I'm not a threat. Got no defences, so I don't know if you can make the leap, but it's about surrender. And so, for me, partly because of my job, but we're all like this, aren't we? I struggle to get off my throne and let God get on my throne. So I'm going to give you just a few examples to do with surrender. So one of them is I've had a rough couple of weeks with a client who's very vulnerable, and I've been awake at night trying to think, what can I do to try and remedy his situation? And it's kept me awake, and I've been learning to say no, and reorientate myself to Jesus and say, come Lord. And when the worries start again and I get all anxious at night, I've been doing it again and again as necessary, and I've been able to sleep. And the same situation, he's been, because of access to material that I can have access to in another capacity, I've been able to check out what's going on with his case, although I haven't actually been officially told it. And I've been resisting that. And it's all about a daily attempt to recognise that I'm not in control and God is in control, and to try and let it go. And it's the same with when my inner critic goes on a rampage. I've been saying to myself, stop, Fiona. Who does Jesus say you are? And then time. If you know me well, you know I run around like a headless chicken. I work far too hard and I'm trying to solve everyone's problems, and it's really rewarding, but it's also exhausting, and I never have enough time. And God is saying to me, stop. And I'm saying to him, I just need to get a really comfy little armchair, and then I'll be able to snuggle up at your feet. And last week I was walking around the British Heart Foundation with Simon when I had this ridiculous conversation, and he said to me, so which of these armchairs, Fiona, is going to help you stop work? So I have all these silly excuses, don't I? But I have to say, doing this little talk has helped me take a few steps in the right direction, which brings me to the second lesson I've learned from Tigger. This whole business is not a challenge for Tigger. I make life so complicated, but Tigger knows what's best. I sound like Winnie the Pooh, don't I? And when I walk past her like Jess just did, she never says to me, oh, I'm busy, it's just not convenient right now, I'm preoccupied with something else. No, she knows what she wants. She knows what's going to happen next. And she's going to get her tummy tickled. And that's what she wants. And I'm trying to remember when I struggle to give up whatever it is, when I'm trying to move over and let God get on my throne, that actually when I lean into Jesus, if this is not too heretical, I'm in the presence of the best tummy tickler. And when I won't surrender, I'm missing out.